Chapter 14, we are slowly moving into territory where I am less and less familiar with what's going on or some of the stories that are being told. There's certainly some major stories that I'll still remember from the future or from later on in the Bible, but we're getting into like these in-between stories, like chapter 13. We're in Genesis 14, by the way. Last video was Genesis 13, and it was like about Abram and Lot, and it's before, I keep saying this, but I think Abram's name eventually gets turned into Abraham, and that's a narrative that I've been driving for several videos now. It hasn't happened yet. We're going to see if it does happen, if I've just been wrong this whole time, or if Abraham is a different guy. But we're in chapter 14, and I'm not really sure what happens here, although the title is Abram Rescues Lot. So he separated from Lot last time. Just as a quick recap, he decided to go in a different direction. They're both extremely wealthy men with entire herds, apparently, like armies of livestock behind them. But this one is Abram, God, I keep saying it. Abram rescues Lot. And let's just see what happens. I don't even know how long. This chapter's pretty long. It's the whole, my brightness is up too much again. I'm going to stop showing the book to people. No spoilers. This is at least a whole page, so this one should last us a while. At the time when Amraphel was king of Shinar, Arioch king of Elasar. Does anyone know who these people are? Kedorlaomer, that's one name. Kedorlaomer, king of Elam, and Tidal, like Kanye West. Tidal, king of Goyim. These kings went to war against Bera, king of Sodom, Bersha, king of Gomorrah. There we go, Sodom and Gomorrah, two different places, two different kings. Shinab, king of Admah, Shemaber, king of Zeboim. Why is it necessary to reference all of these? I guess people knew who they were at one point. When these were written, did people know how long were they written after all this happened? There's so many questions and so many, I was going to say answers, but there's not. So few answers. There we go, that's how English works. And the king of Bela. That is like Twilight. That is, well, with one L. That is Zoar. All of these latter kings joined forces. The last video I mentioned The Way of Kings, Brandon Sanderson books, a high fantasy series that he rapidly writes year over year, well, along with a bunch of other books. And it's so similar. All these kings going to war with each other. I mean, again, hashtag no spoilers, but I don't think that's too important. You find it out pretty quickly at the beginning of the book. It reminds me of that. It's so interesting how history repeats itself. All these latter kings joined forces in the valley of Siddim. That is the Dead Sea Valley. That's cool. We know what the Dead Sea is. That's still around today. It's a sea that has nothing, I think this is why, it has nothing living in it. That's why it's called the Dead Sea. Yeah, I think it's because it's like super salty. There's so much salt that nothing can survive. But what a lot of people know it for is the Dead Sea Scrolls, which was one of the earliest manuscripts that we've ever discovered of the Bible. I think it was discovered in the 40s. There were like some, kids or young adults that were running through like the mountains of, maybe it was Iraq, maybe it was Iran, maybe it was neither one of those, but it's somewhere in the Middle East. And they found in a cave that had been untouched for a long time. I think it was pots, super old pots that they broke and then found scrolls inside of. So the Dead Sea Scrolls are some of the most significant documents or manuscripts that still exist. We tried to preserve them and piece them together as best we can. They're like, if you go to the museum in whichever country it's in, it's like, I don't know, it's Middle East or Asia. I don't want to spread misinformation. There's like pieces of the manuscript and they have like translated portions. The theory being the reason it's so significant is because it's so early, it must also be one of the most accurate versions of the Bible with as little change done to it as possible, which also carries an interesting implication because a lot of people believe that the Bible is perfect and that it cannot have been altered or manipulated by successive generations. But, to each their own, whatever. For 12 years, they had been subject to Kedorlaomer, but in the 13th year, they rebelled. Classic rebellion story. We don't like this king, let's rebel. America wasn't the first one. The British are coming. In the 14th year, Kedorlaomer and the kings allied with him went out. Oh, and the kings who were allied with him is what that means. And the kings allied with him went out and defeated the Rephaites. I don't know who these people are. The Rephaites in Ashtaroth, Karnaim. The Zuzites in Ham. It sounds like a Dr. Seuss book. The Zuzites in Ham. The Emites in Shavah Kiriathaim. And the Horites in the hill country of Seir, as far as El Paran near the desert. I can see why these things were never read in church. These were not the passages that people spent a lot of time on in sermons and in Bible classes. Can't even pronounce the names and nothing is happening. We really pick and choose our parts of the Bible and what's significant. Then they turned back and went to En Mishpat, that is Kadesh, and they conquered the whole territory Amalekites. They're not even repeating the same people. Did I say Amalekites anywhere? There's all these people, and they're just saying they went from one place to the next, conquering different things or people, as well as the Amorites who were living in Hazazon Tamar. Man, I'm impressed if you stayed here and watched the video. There's probably going to be many more chapters like this. Geez, we're only on 14. There's so much. There's so much Bible here. But if enough of you watch me and I can make a living off of this, I'll keep doing it. Then the king of Sodom, the king of Gomorrah. I had no idea there were so many references to this very famous story. Everyone knows the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, but we don't talk about all these other chapters where they were already mentioned somewhere. Then the king of Sodom, the king of Gomorrah, the king of Admah, the king of Zeboim, the king of Bela, that is Zoar. They're telling us again, we literally did that earlier, marched out and drew up their battle lines in the valley of Siddim against Kedorlaomer, king of Elam, Tidal, king of Goyim, Amraphel, king of Shinar, and Arioch, king of Elasar. 4 kings against 5. Thank you for the math. Now, the valley of Siddim was full of tar pits. Well, this does sound like a fantasy book. I mean, no pun intended. And when the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah fled, some of the men fell into them, and the rest fled to the hills. The 4 kings seized all the goods of Sodom and Gomorrah and all of their food. Ooh, ouch. And they went away. They also, here we go. We're finally tying this back into Abram. Where was I? They also carried off Abram's nephew. Oh, it's his nephew. Lot is his nephew. Wait, so their herders were quarreling? They couldn't just be family to each other? Okay, so I just forgot, I guess. Like I said in either this video or the last, I've taken some breaks between recordings, so I forgot who Lot was. But Lot was his nephew, and they split up. Why'd they do that? They also carried off Abram's nephew Lot in his possessions, which he apparently has a lot of, so there must be an army doing this, since he was living in Sodom. So Lot was living in Sodom. All this king stuff happened. They went to a big war, and they carried off Abram's nephew Lot. Okay, things are starting to come together a little bit. I understand why we mentioned all these kings in the tar pits. This is why Abram needs to rescue him. A man who had escaped came and reported this to Abram, the Hebrew. It's the first time they're just calling him the Hebrew. Abram the Hebrew. I'm going to make that like a World of Warcraft name. Now, Abram was living near the great trees of Mamre. I don't know how to pronounce this. M-A-M-R-E. I said it earlier. Mamre. I'll say Mamre. That's because that's funny. Mamre the Amorite, a brother of Eshcol and Aner, all of whom were allied with Abram. It's just the fact that they speak like we're supposed to know who these people are. I guess this is all written to be historical and because it was holy, and religion really gets its claws into people. So they do what they can to preserve it. When Abram heard that his relative had been taken captive, he called out the 318 trained men born in his household. They were all born there, and went in pursuit as far as Dan. Probably pronounced Don, but I'm going to say Dan. It's just D-A-N, like Daniel. And it's funny. It's funny to just say they went in pursuit as far as Dan. During the night, there should be a comma there. During the night, Abram that's, you know what? I have apologized many times for my inflection while reading. I will no longer do that because the punctuation does not always make sense. It should read, during the night, Abram divided his men to attack them. He routed them, pursuing them as far as Habah. But it's supposed to read like, during the night, Abram divided his men to attack them, and he routed them. Wait. During the night, Abraham divided his men to attack them, and he routed them. That doesn't make sense. So he divided them during the night. Abram divided his men to attack them, and he routed them, pursuing them as far as Habah, north of Damascus. Let's just accept that verse and move on. He recovered all the goods and brought back his relative Lot and his possessions, together with the women and the other people. They specify the women. See, this is okay. Real talk, I think this is a really messed up part of the Bible. There's a lot of what we can only assume is God condoning kidnapping people, and in a lot of times killing and or it's implied torturing or assaulting them. So we're not there yet. We haven't quite got to that part, but there's parts where God just goes, hey, you're my army, you're my chosen people, go destroy this city. And we know from history, if you look up any number of wars or the way that people invade and colonize other parts of land, it is not pretty when people invade cities and destroy them. Personally, I don't think there's nothing that specifies that God's people were any exception. And at times it's pretty intense descriptions, which we'll get to. But even in this, he recovered all the goods and brought back his relative Lot and his possessions, together with the women and the other people. Okay, you know what? I'm going to backpedal what I just said because I misread everything. I just spent like 30 seconds trashing the wording here, but I believe what he actually means is together with Lot's, like, groups of women and his people, the people with Lot's party. So while I said does stay true about future parts of the Bible, I know that's in here eventually. This part in particular, I don't think is the case. That was my mistake. I think he was just saying the women and other people along with Lot's, like, party. He doesn't specifically say that, but I believe that's the implication. Let's keep going again. After Abram returned from defeating Kedorlaomer, he defeated him. After Abram returned from, he defeated them. I thought he was just getting his cousin, his nephew? I think Lot's his nephew. After Abram returned from defeating Kedorlaomer, I'm getting better at saying his name, and the kings allied with him, the king of Sodom came out to meet him in the valley of Shaveh. That is the king's valley, okay? I don't know if that's like, it's in parentheses again. I don't know if it's there because like at some point people understood its significance. Probably biblical scholars do, but I don't think your average person today gets that. Then Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought out bread and wine. He was a priest of God Most High. Okay, that's pretty clear. We're talking about God, the God of Abram. The gobstopper. The God of Abram here in the Bible. He was priest of God Most High, and he blessed Abram, saying, "Blessed be Abram by God Most High." Nice. That's a good blessing to get from a priest. Creator of heaven and earth. Yeah, it's definitely the God we're talking about. And praise be to God Most High, who delivered your enemies into your hand. Yeah, see, there we go again. Okay, so yeah, it's God's just behind the war at a minimum. Like, who delivered your enemies into your hand. God Most High. Praise be to him, delivering the enemies. At a minimum, that's endorsing war. We can probably, let's be fair, we can probably extrapolate that they didn't just take them into nice little prisons, handcuff them, and walk them away. At the very least, they're displacing or harming them, but they probably did a lot of bad things in addition to that as well. We can't technically say for sure, but I think we can extrapolate. Then Abram gave him a tenth of everything. Nice, that's a common theme, tithing. The king of Sodom said to Abram, "Give me," and by the way, if you don't know what tithing is, that's when you give 10% of your earnings to the church. That's when they pass around the little plate at a church during the ceremony, during the sermon, during the event. And they say, 10% to God, 10% to savings, 80% for the rest of your expenses. That's a common mathematical ratio for Christians. Then that's what I think this is echoing. Then, or what we echo from teachings in the Bible, I should probably say it that way. Then Abraham gave him a tenth of everything. The king of Sodom said to Abram, I keep saying it, however many times I've said that, just change it to Abram. "Give me," the king of Sodom said to Abram, "give me the people and keep the goods for yourself." Nice. He just wants the bodies. The king just wants the people. But Abram said to the king of Sodom, with raised hand, "I have sworn an oath to the Lord, God Most High, creator of heaven and earth, that I will accept nothing belonging to you." Nice. Not even a thread. Yeah, probably because he's rich already. Not even a thread or the strap of a sandal. Can you imagine the king's like, "Abram, thank you for helping me win the war. Here's some thread and a few sandal straps. Thank you so much." And Abram's like, no. I have raised a hand to an oath to the Lord. I will not take not even a single thread, not even a single strap of sandal. The next line, okay, now this is me continuing, "so that you will never be able to say, I made Abram rich," because he's already rich. "I will accept nothing but what my men have eaten in the, you can't give that back. And the share that belongs to the men who went with me, to Aner, Eshcol, and Mamre." Mamre actually sounds like one of the gods that created the world in Lord of the Rings with music. If you've only watched Lord of the Rings and you've never looked into the Silmarillion, or maybe they cover that in the show, I haven't really watched it after the 4th episode of the first season. "Let them have their share." That's the end of the chapter. I stopped before the last sentence. Let them have their share. That's the end of chapter 14. Another great chapter of development for Abram. He's really getting a decent portion of the Bible here. We give a lot to Jesus. That's what I meant to say. Give a lot to a lot of other people, but who knew that Abram had so much room here in Genesis, one of the most significant books in the Bible. Everyone concentrates on Adam, Noah, and Moses eventually, who I'm pretty sure is in Genesis. He's in Exodus too. I'm pretty sure, because all of the Jews are exiting. That must be where the word exit comes from. They're exiting Egypt, I think. But we'll get there for sure. That's the end of chapter 14, I think, is the number I said.